هيا على الصلاة. هيا على الفلاح. هيا على الفلاح. الله أكبر والله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله رب السماوات ورب الأرض رب العالمين، وله الكبرياء في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم. الحمد لله الذي بنعمته تتم الصالحات. ربنا لك الحمد حتى ترضى، ولك الحمد إذا رضيت، ولك الحمد بعد الرضا. صل اللهم وسلم وبارك على سيد الأولين والآخرين محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، الملك الحق المبين. أشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله وصفيه من خلقه وخليله وأمينه على وحيه. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. My dear respected brother and sister in Islam, all praise and glory and thanks are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We owe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala everything we have. وَمَا بِكُم مِّن نِعْمَةٍ فَمِنَ اللَّهِ. Anything good that is working in your life, any blessing, it's a favor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us so much that there is hardly anything that we can do to thank Him enough. وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the verse that we recited says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ حَقَّ تُقَاتِهِ. حَقَّ تُقَاتِهِ means as is His due. So the standard against which you should compare yourself, compare your iman, compare your taqwa, compare your worship, compare what you do fi sabilillah, you have always to compare it to what you can do. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking you to do your utmost, maximum. That's the word jihad in Islam, وَجَاهِدُوا. Jahidu meaning do everything you can, strive. بِأَمْوَالِكُمْ وَأَنفُسِكُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Don't spare any effort that you can commit فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. That we are here in this life in a competition, in a race. Racing against the clock is ticking, but also competing with one another. So what is the competition? Allah to test you who is the best in deeds. لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. And then لَا يُكَلِّفُ اللَّهُ نَفْسًا إِلَّا وُسْعَهَا, the verse that is unfortunately abused and misused. People, they say, Allah does not ask you more than what you can, which is true. But the verse says, Allah asks you to do everything you can, but nothing more. So that meaning is lost. وُسْعَهَا means your utmost, to the best of your ability. That's wus'ah. And in another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَا يُكَلِّفُ اللَّهُ نَفْسًا إِلَّا مَا أَتَاهَا. Allah will not ask you for more than the resources that you have available. The time you have available, the energy, whatever you have, Allah will ask you, what did you do compared to what you were given? My dear respected brother and sister in Islam, we started several weeks ago this idea of talking about change, تغيير. Why the Muslim situation did not change. Why the Muslim situation did not change in spite of repeated attempts. And these attempts are very serious. And the people, they have done them, they have the best of the intentions. And there was a lot of sacrifice in all these attempts to change the situation. But why every time we end up that the situation does not change? In spite of many reforms, many harakat islah, many revolutions even, yet things did not change. Now when I say change, some people, they have this idea of something is better than nothing and we are now better than yesterday. That's not the proper attitude. The proper attitude of the believer and everybody is not to compare with yesterday, is to compare with where you are supposed to be and where you can be. Definitely, Muslims nowadays, they are nowhere close to where we can be and where we should be. Where we should be, you find it in the Quran. Ummatan wasatan, khayra ummatan, etc. We are nowhere close to that. Leading community, model community, etc. We're not there. Where we can do, you can look at the numbers. You can look at the numbers, the resources that are available for Muslims. They are not less, if not more, than the resources that were available in other countries and societies that are thriving. There are some nations in this world who are thriving with almost no natural resources. None. No oil, no gas, nothing. Japan is one of them. No natural resources, volcanic, etc. So everything runs against them. Yet, and earthquakes all the time, and yet they manage to thrive. And so on and so forth. So where we can be, the numbers tells us that we should be in much better situation than this. And then if Europe, after a very bloody war that claimed the lives of tens of millions, they were able to develop an integrated market, an integrated economy. There is something called European Union and common currency nowadays. Why Muslims are not able to do that? Why? You can see only countries fighting each other or fighting inside the country itself. So we are nowhere close to where we should be and where we can be. And unfortunately, we did not manage to close this gap in spite of repeated attempts. At certain point in time, we said the problem is colonization, istamar. We rallied against it, pushed it out, nothing changed. Then we said, no, I think we discovered that the problem is people have deserted Islam. Okay, let's rally, bring people back to the mosques, to Islam and hijab, etc., and then nothing. Outcome, there is nothing. Nothing significantly has changed. And then we said, no, we have a problem of dictatorship. Okay, let's rally. And then revolutions topple these dictators, and then the next day to wait to see results, and we saw nothing. And the Arab Spring is more than 13 years old now. We're entering the 14th year. What did you see in Libya, Yemen, Tunisia, Egypt? Where? What did you see? So serious attempts cost a lot of lives and a lot of efforts, and then the outcome, unfortunately, things did not change. So these are two major questions: why our situation is not changing, why we have that gap, and why the repeated attempts did not succeed. These are questions that we have to address and discuss and think about them. And the other, of course, the more important question is, how can we do it? How can we do it right? I mean, this time, based on lessons learned, how can we do it right and make sure that this time it will work? And then we talked about there is a methodology. If you want to treat an illness, if you want to solve a crisis, if you want to change a situation, there is a methodology. If you apply it right, you will succeed. You don't apply it right, then you will not get the desired outcome. And these are the steps that we mentioned from the first time, and then we kept elaborating on them. One, proper diagnosis. Where are we? What is exactly going on? You don't have the proper answer for this, forget about the rest, because the rest will not matter for you. If you start on the wrong direction, if you have the wrong assessment of the situation, superficial or partial, not deep enough, not comprehensive enough, then there is no point. That's diagnosis. Then we talked about the what, the why, and how we came to this point. Medical history. Remember the medical history? How and why we came to this point. 3, now we understood the present time, we understood the evolution. Now we can build on it, build the future. Next, you have to have a clear vision. Vision is a destination. Where do you want to go? What do you want to achieve? That vision has to be something that is sustained. Don't have a limited goal that you achieve it and then you relax. It has to be long-term so that it will keep you sustain your mobilization for a long time. Then you need the strategy on how to get there. We know where we are now and we know where we're heading. We need a strategy to get us there, strategy and plan. And then we need to execute that plan diligently. And then do something that unfortunately we don't do, which is documentation, evaluation, and then holding those who are in charge accountable, and then be prepared to make adjustments. If you find yourself on the wrong track, it's not the end of the world. It can happen. So that's why people have plan A and plan B and contingency plans. Why? Because sometimes the first plan does not work or the things change. So, and this is something that we don't do. And yesterday, I watched a documentary on what the Israelis have done after 2006. 2006, they considered it was big failure. Amazing. Amazing, the amount of assessment, the amount of pointing to the flaws, what went wrong, who made the wrong decision, what are the remedy, what strategies need to be changed. Amazing. On the other side, what happened? The Lebanese, they continued in the state of celebration. Until this time, we had people who came up with the same strategy as before, and people who learned their lessons, and we see the results. See the difference between somebody who got swamped in celebration mode, victory. Don't revisit anything, don't reassess, nothing. And between people who did all of this work, and then when they come back, we saw the difference. Documentation, evaluation, assessment, and adjustments. So these are two major problems, and they are related. Why we did not change, and why the attempts did not succeed, and then how we can do it. Now, why the attempts did not succeed? Because the diagnoses were very superficial. Those 3 attempts, all 3, they had very superficial diagnosis. They dealt with the symptoms, not the root cause. Yes, colonization is a problem, but it was not the root cause of the problem. It was the consequence of something else, as we're going to discuss. Yes, people deserted Islam, but the problem is much bigger than that. So when we brought them back to Islam of sha'air, the Islam of rituals, and the Islam of madahir, and personal fiqh, nothing happened. Because Islam itself was lost. So we brought them back to something that is already mutilated, was already mutilated or defective. And then dictatorship is the same thing. It is a problem, it has to go, but that's the tip of the iceberg. That's not the root cause of the problem. That's why when it is eliminated, we start looking for the results and we see nothing. So the diagnosis was very superficial. Why diagnosis was very superficial? I'm going to keep asking these questions. Why diagnosis was very superficial? Because our reading of history was wrong. And that's the key. That's the key to answer the first question, why things are not changing and why those attempts did not succeed. Because diagnosis is superficial. Why diagnosis superficial? Because our reading of history is wrong. Vast majority of Muslims, they believe that we were in great shape for centuries until the collapse of the Ottoman state or Khilafah or empire. Vast majority of Muslims, that's what they have in their mind. We were in very good shape until 1924. And we were leading, and Islam was in. That's why when we brought people back to Islam, we brought them to that Islam because we thought it was okay. Because we thought that Islam survived through all these centuries and it's still in good shape. So when you think that you were in good shape and your religion is in good shape, that resulted in this superficial diagnosis. What is the superficial diagnosis? If we have been in great shape and our religion was in good shape all this time, so all the problems happened recently. That's why we went to those problems. We went to the colonization because it happened recently. We went to those problems. Why? Because in our mind, the rest is perfect. So problems are very recent. Let's fix them. As I mentioned last time, it was like a road accident. We were on a highway. We just had an accident or went wrong exit, so we can come back and we resume. And that's not true. This narration does not make sense. And that's why our younger people are not accepting it, because it's very confusing, full of contradiction and flaws. Why? Because how can you explain, if you were in great shape, how can you turn overnight into colonized countries? If there is something like this happens, any country or society that was in very good shape, overnight goes into free fall, becomes Sykes-Picot, two people meeting and slicing it like pizza, which part you want to take? Doesn't make sense. You cannot convince anybody that this is the case. It doesn't happen overnight. This collapse does not happen overnight. Then the question should be, why we were colonized? That's the question that was not addressed. Why? Because we thought colonization is the problem. But colonization is why we thought colonization is the problem? Because we thought before that everything was perfect. So now, why we were colonized? Because we were weak. You were weak, so things were not perfect. Because it doesn't happen overnight. Soviet Union, when it collapsed, it did not collapse overnight. There are a lot of things that are in the work weakening. So states and societies do not collapse overnight. There is a weakness that keep working until they reach the collapse. So because we were weak. Why we were weak? Because we have been under the dictatorship for centuries. There is something that is very ironic, by the way. Wallahi, laughable. Do you know nowadays people are revolting against the rule of the family? عائلة الأسد, عائلة this, and حكم العائلة يعني. طب احنا we accepted that for centuries. Oh, the same rule. And how can you say this is bad? We're revolting against, but that was great. That's why I say there is a lot of confusion and there is a lot of contradiction. You are rejecting something now, you say it's bad, absolute power by one individual that is passed on to his son. On the other hand, you say those centuries when this was applied were great. You say that this kind of rule now has caused destruction, a lot of damage to Syria and to other countries. But you say, no, that kind of rule was great at that time. Can't. It's the same. Dawla Umayyah, Abbasiyya, etc. It was absolute power of one individual that is passed on to his son. It's exactly what you are revolting against now. So we need to reconcile that in our mind. Either both of them are good or both of them are bad. You can't say this is bad and we have to end it, but in history it was really, Hukm al-Aila was really amazing, was great. No, you can't. I mean, that's inconsistent. That's why we're full of inconsistency here. So we accepted that for a century. So what's the point here? This attempt of change did not succeed. We were building on a very shaky foundation because the future is built on the present and the past. And if your diagnosis about the present is very superficial and your reading of the past is wrong, then the foundation is very shaky. That's why every time we want to build the future and it collapses. The foundations are very shaky. What are the foundations? For the future, the present time, and the history. You have to have the proper assessment and the proper reading of your history. So the diagnosis was wrong or superficial, and the reading of history was wrong. So what's the solution? Dig deeper. I mean, if you try to construct a building and keep collapsing, that tells you that you just have to go dig deeper than that. And that's where I proposed a narration that I believe it makes much more sense. And it has to be really packaged, and I believe has to be really spread among Muslims so that we can resolve those conflicts in our mind and those contradictions and inconsistency. And this is how you can build on solid foundations and you can reach the proper solution. So colonization, because we were weak and because we lagged behind. When there was a renaissance in Europe and the Reformation, I know we were stagnant. There was about 3 centuries where we were going into very soft landing and Europe and the West was thriving. So it didn't happen overnight. Why we were weak? Because we lived under dictatorship and dynasty rule and absolute power for centuries. Now, what's the problem? What's the problem with that type of rule? Just think about it. Absolute power. Remember, they say power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So absolute power corrupts and it starts from the top and trickle down to the societies. That's what absolute power does. Specifically in our case, what did that absolute power for centuries, what damage it caused? Number 1, mutilation of Islam. Tashweeh lil-Islam. Why Islam, the true Islam, was mutilated under dynasty rule? Because they cannot coexist. The true Islam, the inspiring, empowering Islam that is about mission, maqasid, justice, accountability of the leadership by consent, shura, etc., cannot survive with the dynasty rule. One or the other must go. So Islam was mutilated in order to become compatible with that dynasty rule. And we have Fuqaha Sultan that did a wonderful job. MashaAllah, yani, they issue fatwa a la carte, whatever you want. They can issue fatwa for the ruler. So we have Islam, the true Islam, is not compatible with that kind of rule. So the solution was to mutilate it, reduce it, remove anything that inspires people, empowers them, and just focus on the sha'air. And that's the Islam that we thought was preserved, and that's the Islam that we brought our people back to it. And that's why it did not produce any result. Mutilation of Islam because they cannot coexist. As a result, Muslims have abandoned their defining mission. Islam is essentially Risalat Hayat, life mission. So if you take the sense of mission from Islam, if you take the maqasid, it will produce people who can be suppressed, who can be subdued. And that's what those rulers want. They don't want citizens. They want subjects. They want people who obey. And that's why we have the Sam'a and Ta'a li Wali al-Amr, and we have all that fiqh and Sultat al-Mutaghallib or al-Mutasallit, whoever comes to power, regardless of how he comes, and regardless of what he does, as long as they establish law and order and stability, they are legitimate. That's the fiqh. That's the fiqh that is so widespread. And that's why majority of Muslims, they accept anybody who comes to power and establish law and order, regardless of how they come and regardless of what they do. So Islam that is stripped from the sense of mission and maqasid, that's the essence of Islam. That's Jawhar al-Islam. That's the one that produced the great success stories of the early days. Number two, that kind of absolute power causes a lot of damage to the people, to the Muslim mind, and to the Muslim personality. And again, I invite you to read Tabaya al-Istibdad, a book by Abd al-Rahman al-Kawakibi. Tabaya al-Istibdad, small booklet, was translated into English, available online, PDF, etc. Tabaya al-Istibdad. Short booklet, focus about the damage that dictatorship causes on people. The damage that dictatorship causes on the manners of people, on their thinking, on everything. So you have personality that is crooked or twisted. Why? Because it is suppressed, and therefore they only can get by through crooked ways. That's what you do under dictatorship. Only bribery, hypocrisy, whatever. That's the only way you can get by. But not honesty, not be yourself, etc. That will not cut it. Now, why this happened and we tolerated? Why this dictatorship? So now we're coming from very different angle. So why we tolerated this dictatorship or this dynasty rule for all these centuries, and why it happened in the first place? We said it was a response to the civil war, to the fitna, kubra, that happened, the bloody war that happened among Muslims, to the point that situation became so chaotic and shocking that people were longing for stability. That's it. We just want to stop this bloodshed at any price, any cost. So when this system was established, people accepted it. And the scholars later on made it even legitimate. And even though it was meant to be temporary, it became permanent. Like everything, by the way. All these dictatorships, they start slow and gradually and temporary, and they become permanent. And nowadays, why we'll go to very far? So show me at least Arab countries, because some Muslim countries, they are democratic, like Malaysia, etc. But at least Arab countries, show me somebody who is like elected or leading by consent. None. As we speak now, we have someone in Syria who is ruling the country with no constitution, no law. Whatever he says. Of course, people will say, no, because it is a revolution, because it is temporary. But that's how it started all the time. All the time they say, because after independence, because we need stability, because we had a civil war, because of this, because of that. But that temporary becomes permanent. If you allow it to continue, it becomes permanent. So we accepted it. Why it happened? Because of that bloody civil war. Why we had that civil war? Why it happened? We explained because Muslims have seen or witnessed an explosive growth in a very short period of time. Within 3 months or a couple of months, Muslims absorbed the two superpowers of the world, the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire. Go and read about the two battles. They consider them among the battles that changed the world, Yarmouk and Qadisiyah. So you have a small community in Medina and Arabian Peninsula with a very simple system, very simple administration, very limited capacity, and they absorbed two superpowers of the world. Millions of people came. Conspiracy, nifaq, hypocrisy, you name it, ta'amur, you name it. And you are not ready for this. Now, why it did not happen at that time, at that moment, when this explosive growth happened? We said because of the exceptional leadership skills of Umar ibn Khattab and his exceptional personality. So the gap was there. the gap between becoming superpower of the world and has very limited system and capacity, but you have a strong personality that covered it. The moment Umar al-Khattab died, it was exposed. And that's we have that chain reaction. I believe this makes much more sense, because this is going to lead us somewhere else, not to those superficial assessment or diagnosis. If you accept that we lost our way long time ago, both the religious and the political, that political system has nothing to do with Islam, and nobody should try to reinstate it again, because it doesn't have any of the Islamic principle, the one man absolute power that goes to inherited by his son, that has nothing to do with Islam. So that's the, and then when it comes to religion, our religion was mutilated over the century and reached us in a very superficial, very obsolete, very reduced version of it. That's why it is not producing anything, even though it is embraced by millions and hundreds of millions of people across the world. Now, do we stop there? No. This analysis is going to lead us to the solutions. That's why I said the purpose is that this time we need to do it right. But based on this, not based on the other narration, based on this, that we lost our way, Islam was mutilated long time ago and reached us in that reduced, superficial, twisted, mutilated version. And then during all this time, societies were weak, and we answered the questions that people may ask. People can say, how about the achievements we have in our history? Yes, we had achievements. We have great achievement. But those achievements were, number one, just because there is enlightened Khalifa. Every now and then, we have an enlightened Khalifa who will promote these things, number one. Number two, most of those achievements happened in the area that are permitted. Architectures, etc., but not in the things not in ijtihad in Islam. And number three, a lot of those scientists and scholars were persecuted. So it happened in spite of the system, not because of it. It's not that system great that produced those. No, those achievements happened in spite of the system, not because of it. Now, why we were leading the world, if you're saying that we were weak? Because there was no competition. The moment that we had the competition, we collapsed. The state remained strong, but the society, like we talked about Soviet Union, one day before it collapsed, the state was very strong, and the army, but the society was weakening and weakening. So again, same thing, Khilafah, including Dawla al-Uthmaniyya or Ottoman, the state remained strong all this time, but the society was weakening, and that's why we had that collapse. وَتُوبُوا إِلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونتوب إليه. نعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهدي الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. My dear respected brother and sister in Islam, the other thing that caused us to come to this point is the freezing of ijtihad, which happened very early on. That Muslims, they agreed that we don't need ijtihad anymore. Ijtihad meaning using your brain or your mind and intellect in order to find the best way to understand and implement the text. Because Islam survives and thrives with ijtihad, not the other way around. You stop ijtihad, you think you're going to freeze it, it's going to be detached from life. So why ijtihad was stopped? Why it was frozen? One, as I said, that system doesn't want people to think, they want subject, and the scholars went along with them. Number two, when you remove the mission of Islam and the maqasid, and you leave it only prayer and fasting, what ijtihad do you need? Whatever left from Islam does not need an ijtihad. What ijtihad do you need for wudu and ghusl and salah and fasting? There is no ijtihad. So one, rulers do not like this idea of ijtihad whatsoever. They don't want people to think. They want to promote that Islam of sha'air, rituals, and appearances and personal fiqh. Number two, whatever is left from Islam does not need any ijtihad anymore. And that's why Islam was frozen since that time. So we had an understanding of Islam that was frozen over the century, mutilated. Essential elements were removed, small elements were blown out of proportion. That's what reached us. And when we thought that the solution is to bring Muslims back to this Islam, we did it, but it did not change anything. Why? Because we brought them back to something that was already defective or flawed. Inshallah, we'll come back and talk about, okay, based on all of this, where do we go from here? How do we do it right next time, inshallah. ربنا اتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم اشف مرضانا وارحم موتانا، توفنا وانت راض عنا، واختم بالصالحات أعمالنا، واجعل خير أعمالنا خواتمها، وخير أيامنا يوم نلقاك. ربنا ارحم والدينا كما ربونا صغارا، وارحم موتانا وجميع موتى المسلمين. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إنا كنا من الظالمين. صلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وأقم الصلاة.
الله أكبر والله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. هيا على الصلاة، هيا على الفلاح. قد قامت الصلاة، قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر والله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
استووا استقيموا الصلاة يرحمكم الله. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. قل اللهم مالك الملك تؤتي الملك من تشاء وتنزع الملك ممن تشاء وتعز من تشاء وتذل من تشاء بيدك الخير، إنك على كل شيء قدير. تولج الليل في النهار وتولج النهار في الليل، وتخرج الحي من الميت وتخرج الميت من الحي، وترزق من تشاء بغير حساب. الله. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم واخشوا يوما لا يجزي والد عن ولده ولا مولود هو جاز عن والده شيئا إن وعد الله حق فلا تغرنكم الحياة الدنيا ولا يغرنكم بالله الغرور. إن الله عنده علم الساعة وينزل الغيث ويعلم ما في الأرحام وما تدري نفس ماذا تكسب غدا وما تدري نفس بأي أرض تموت إن الله عليم خبير. الله سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Assalamu alaikum. Just a few announcements. Today, the donation was down. If you did not donate, again, even if a dollar, it makes a big difference. Please do so. Number two, every month, we have the Nikah Salam. Last Sunday, it happened. If you know anybody or you are looking for a spouse, we have very beautiful hearts. You can come here, inshallah. You will be very good. Number three, if you are sick, remember there's a virus going around. I know you want to come pray with us. That's what we want. But if you stay home, it's better so you don't get people sick. And I want to thank everybody for coming and also the Khatib for a wonderful khutbah today. Jazakumullah khair.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jummah Mubarak. Neither, it's not this past Sunday, it's 2 Sundays from now. The last Sunday of every month, we have a social and open house for Salam Nikah. We have a practical problem where a lot of our brothers don't find sisters to marry or spouses to marry, and a lot of sisters don't find spouses to marry. So please take advantage of this the last Sunday of every month. If you don't know who this is Brother Javed with Easy Travel. He's talking about Hajj and Umrah in a few minutes.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As you know, the Hajj season is start, alhamdulillah, and anyone want to go for Hajj, only he or she can go with the nusuk, with the American passports and for the green cards. So please do not pay to any individual group or any travel agency any money, because last year a lot of people scammed. So only go online and register yourself for Hajj and pay online only. So alhamdulillah, Easy Travel is also doing this thing, but don't pay to me because everything pay by the online to the nusuk. So inshallah next week the packages will be announced. So inshallah anyone want to go for Hajj, so inshallah we are helping to complete your application. If you want any kind of help, we are available to upload your documents, your passport, your picture and everything. So after that you can choose your package and go inshallah and make your Hajj. And also the Umrah package is also available for February, March and April. So anyone wants to go, the flights are there, so you can take one flight. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.